Alright, in this video, I want to talk about the rapture, mainly because what I've noticed is it gets views. If you just put rapture in the title, a lot more people click on it. I took a look at my videos and I noticed that all the videos that have to do with rapture usually have twice as many views as any other video, if not more, like even 7 times as many views as any other video. When I go look at a lot of the most viewed Christian videos, they're videos that have to do with the rapture. So if you want attention, you want to get views, talk about the rapture. I even see people that have sold out saying that the rapture was going to happen sometime in the past, and they were wrong, yet they keep going forward. They're not like when you listen to someone like, let's say, Generation 2434 or Burial or End Time Dream and Vision, Uptime. They don't say, oh, the rapture's coming at this time. They say, like, hey, we know that it's soon. We can feel it. We think it's at an appointed time, at a feast day, maybe around this time, right? So we're going to be watching and hoping that it is at this time. But there's people that I've watched who said, no, it's going to be at this time. It doesn't happen. They keep talking about it, and they keep getting a lot of views, right? And I was like, that's strange. I mean, a lot of people are really looking forward to this, or just want to learn about it. No, it's weird because the people who I'm listening to who talk about it as it's comforting to one another, knowing that Jesus is going to come back, right? And when you actually look in the scriptures, there's not a whole lot of talk about the rapture, at least not directly. And it's used just like that to comfort one another. But in the context, it's comforting you, not that, hey, you're going to be alive when Jesus comes back, but that people who have died, they didn't miss out on anything. Jesus is going to raise them back to life. It doesn't matter if you're alive or not by the time Jesus comes back. And that's what you're to comfort one another with, is not so much, hey, you're going to be the part of the generation that's alive when he comes back, right? But that seems to be a whole lot of the talk of a lot of Christian ministries, is about the rapture. It's right around the corner, right? And I've talked to people who said that, yeah, they were convinced that, hey, yeah, it makes sense. Like a couple of years ago, you have the Rapture 12 sign, that, hey, this is going to have to do with the Feast of Trumpets. And they were pretty sold out. Not that they sold the farm, but they were like, yeah, I really think it's going to happen. So they use that to actually start reaching out to family and friends and telling them the gospel, but also letting them know, hey, the rapture's coming and you're going to miss it. And if you miss it, then you're going to have to go through the time of Jacob's trouble. You're going to have to suffer and die in order to refuse the mark of the beast, that your soul may be saved. And then it never happened. And then these people talking about the rapture or make it pretty convincing that, hey, maybe it's going to be at this feast, it's at that feast. And it is no longer an encouragement, as these people are saying that their witness is kind of shoddy now, because they use that to preach to family and friends, and they got their attention and talking about, hey, the rapture could be at this time, and some of their family and friends would listen a little bit. They didn't necessarily believe and accept it, but there was enough convincing evidence where they were paying attention. Like, wow, that's interesting. And then it didn't happen. And since it didn't happen, family and friends would then be like, okay, you're part of a cult kind of thing. You're one of those weirdos who keep thinking that the rapture's at this time, and then when it's not at that time, you set a new date, and you fooled me once, you're not going to fool me again. So it's become a hindrance. And what I've noticed is that a lot of these people who are talking about the rapture, they're also doing a very good deed in that they are also preaching the gospel, right? But that doesn't mean that they're not necessarily a wolf in sheep's clothing, a false prophet, a false teacher. And I'll explain real quick. I didn't have this ready up here, but in Philippians, might be chapter 1, might be chapter 2 here. I think it's right here. Paul goes to jail here, and he mentions here at verse 12, he says, "But I would ye should understand, brethren, that the things which happened unto me have fallen out rather unto the furtherance of the gospel." And that's a great thing, right? But he says this about that. He says, people have been emboldened by what happened to him to preach the gospel. And he says that that's what they've gone and do, but he says there's another group preaching the gospel. He says, "Some indeed preach Christ even of envy and strife, and some also of goodwill. The one preaches Christ of contention, not sincerely, supposing to add affliction to my bonds. While the other one is preaching out of love," right? But I wanted to focus on this right here, is that there's people who are preaching Christ. They're preaching the gospel, not because they actually believe it. So just because someone is preaching the gospel doesn't mean that they are a Christian, that they're a truly born again believer. I actually like that movie that I believe it was Kevin Sorbo who actually produced it. It's like the Left Behind, The Rise of the Antichrist, I think it was. And in that movie, there was a pastor who was left behind. And everybody's like, "Well, why are you left behind?" And he was like, "Well, I knew these things and I preached these things, but I didn't actually believe it." He's basically like a parrot, regurgitating what he's learned and what he picked up from other people, right? And then it really happened. And then it's like, whoa, wait a second. I was just preaching this basically to make a living. And now this is true? So, whoa, right? From his point of view, anyway. And I was realizing that an issue that might be going on here is that these people who keep saying that, oh, the rapture, it's going to be at Pentecost, and you listen to them, I'm convinced the rapture is going to be at Pentecost, maybe even this year, at the end of this month, around July 26th. Not necessarily on that day, maybe a day or two before or after, but around July 26th is Pentecost, and that seems like that's going to be the rapture this year, right? I'm not saying it is. I'm saying that listening to them, it's convincing. But I've also listened to them in the past about how Shavuot, that's when we were going to be raptured this year, and also to Passover, even second Passover, uh, this year as well. And before that, it was Hanukkah, Tabernacles, Atonement, and a very convincing one is the Feast of Trumpets, the day and hour no one knows. So those things, each one very convincing, make you think that it's happening at that feast day, but not just on that feast day this year. Right? Now, they're not saying that it is, they're just saying, hey, this is where it could be. And that's where they're hiding behind that, oh, we're not setting dates and then just changing it. When that's what they're basically doing. Oh, we think it's going to happen now, and then it doesn't. And a lot of these people have been doing it since 2016 or so. So it's been over 5 years, right? And it's close to a decade now, every year going through this. And they keep going because when you talk about the rapture, you get attention. Even if you're not making money off of it, you're able to get attention. And that alone feels good, right? I don't get a lot of comments, and most of the comments I get are from people who disagree. They want to correct me, and that's not usually it. A lot of times it's an insult of some kind, right? They don't want to talk about it and explain how I'm wrong and they're right. They just want to let me know that I'm a moron and I'm stupid and that they're right. So basically just trolls. And then now and then I get comments from somebody that is encouraging, and those little comments where somebody says something that's nice, positive, where somebody's just saying like, a good video, I like this, it goes a long way. It really does. So I can only imagine how these people feel that are getting a lot of attention, and they're like, great video, love the information, learning so much, and you just suck that up, right? It feels good. The dopamine rush, the happiness machine you turn into, it can become a drug, right? There's a lot of people who, what do they become, like a one-hit wonder, whether they did a song or a TV show or a movie, and they become really famous and popular, and then they're forgotten about, and then they just go around trying to get that same attention that they used to get. I think they did that like with a Simpsons episode where Bart Simpson, he becomes famous because he has one of his catchphrases like "eat my shorts" or "cowabunga" or something weird like that. And everybody's like, say the line, and they love him. And then eventually everybody's over it, and he doesn't have that attention anymore, yet he wants it. So he has to come up with something new, right, to get the attention. And I think something like that might be going on. But not only that, something a little more sinister, where these people are also preaching the gospel and praise God, right? I hope God blesses them and blesses the message and that it gets out to the whole world. And that through even one of these people, whether it's Tyler from Generation 2434 or Barry from Dr. Barry Awe or Aaron from God a Minute or Repo Man 64 there, Watchwoman. I don't care if you just use one of them and reach the whole world. That'd be great, right? But I'm starting to think with some of these people that the sinister thing is that they're attaching the gospel to keep saying that the rapture's at this date and then it doesn't happen. Like, to us as believers, we're like, okay, it didn't happen this at this feast, maybe the next one. But how do the people outside of the church look at that? Kind of like what Paul talks about with tongues. He says, yeah, you got the gift of tongues, that's great. But what is better for the church is if you prophesy, because he was thinking about, what about the people outside of the church? How are they going to look at you? If they come and they see everybody's going blah, 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 they're speaking languages nobody knows, it sounds like gibberish, and they're going to think you're mad. Right? So he wants you to put out a good image to the world. So when you keep saying, oh, the rapture's at this time and it's not. Oh, it's at this next date. Oh, it's not. And you just keep doing it and doing it. How do you appear to the world? Will you appear like, what was it, camping? You appear like the people from years ago where they would say, oh, the rapture's at this date. And then when it's not, oh, I was off a month. Oh, I was off 6 months. Oh, I was off a year. Let's just keep changing the date, right? And that's how you look to them. The only difference is that you're saying, well, I'm not saying it is at this date. I just think it is a good possibility that it could be at this time. So you're kind of giving yourself a little loophole out of it. right? You're not fully committed to it, but that's not how the world's going to see it. They're like, oh yeah, that person, yeah, he keeps saying that it's going to be at every feast every year. Every year, he says, oh, it's Passover. Oh no, second Passover. Oh no, it's Shavuot. Oh no, it's Pentecost. Oh no, it's trumpets. Oh, it's atonement. Oh, it's tabernacles. Oh no, it's Hanukkah. And then some of them even bring up Feast of Trees and oil and bringing up all these obscure feasts that a lot of people don't really know about. Maybe not necessarily listed in the scriptures. And it's like you just never know because God's probably going to do something on his appointed time. And I'm not saying they're wrong, but I've have seen how the witness is kind of ruined. Not completely, because I know eventually the rapture is going to happen. But just imagine 2,000 years ago if they were talking about Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming. And then that person dies. People would say, oh yeah, he really loved Jesus. He really believed he was coming, but he didn't. So how many people do you think are going to follow Jesus and come to the gospel because of that? And how many people do you think are more likely to reject the gospel because of that? Because if they see a Christian saying, oh, the rapture is coming, Jesus is coming, and then they grow old and die, and then he's still not here, that's going to get them to think, okay, well, maybe God's not with that guy. Maybe he's not with Christianity. I mean, if he really loved him, why would he make him think that he's coming in his lifetime and then not show up? Right? It's going to get them to question things and think about things and doubt it and walk away. Even talking to somebody saying that they were very convinced of, I believe it was just a couple of years ago, of the trumpets, especially seeing all the connections to it, all the people talking about it, even the Before the Wrath movie documentary by Kevin Sorbo. And it was like, yeah, we're going home on this day. The Rapture 12 sign all pointed to it. So they talked to their parents, who are Catholics, to try to get them the gospel. Because they don't believe in the rapture and they don't believe the gospel either. They don't even know what it is. And it didn't happen. And their parents were already like, no one knows the day of the hour, and there isn't a rapture. The church has to go through the time to be purified. They already had that view. So now they just are more solidified in their belief, and that their child is deceived and is part of some kind of fanatical cult, and that they're just lunatics believing no, the rapture's always tomorrow and never is, right? So all in all, I don't think you should be worried about the rapture. The more I think about it, it's probably something we shouldn't really be engaging in as much as what we're doing. Yeah, now and then talk about it. Just like now and then uh, pastors will have a preaching about certain topics that they'll make sure they'll talk about once a year, like hell or whatever. They'll bring it up at least once a year, maybe once a month or something. They'll bring up a sermon about certain subjects. Maybe now and then that's what you do. Because there's a lot of things that are more important right now since the church is lukewarm, very worldly, and we need a good witness to the world. And we're not providing that. Right? But we're looking for the rapture. Why? Oh, because they made us wear masks. They threatened us to lose our jobs if we didn't take the vaccines and stuff like that. All right, and that time passed. There's people in China in jail for having a Bible or for believing Christianity and preaching the gospel to somebody. They've been dealing with that for years. So what we ought to be doing is planning to live our entire lives here, not as though you're trying to build up a nice house and land and have a family and leave an inheritance, but that you're planning on being here for God, as a witness for God, until you're 120 years old. I'm just putting it out there because Moses is 120 years old, and it's a lot older than a lot of people live today. So just plan on that, not planning on your retirement fund and your Social Security benefits and all this and securing that. No, plan on living to 120 by faith. Not just faith that you're going to get that old, but by faith that God's going to take care of you no matter what. Right? You're just going by faith that it's going to work out, and that's how it's going to be. And then I'm going to die, ripe old age, giving a lot of witness to the whole world. And when Jesus comes back, he'll raise me from the dead. Like, it doesn't matter if you're alive when he comes back or not. And it's almost as if people feel like they're losing out if they're not. As if they gotta be, he gotta come soon because things are just gonna get worse. When things aren't even really that bad right now. Most of the stuff going on right now is talk. And people talk about how the left is all shaken up because of words and their feelings. Yet you see the same thing in Christianity, right? They talk about enforcing something and you act as though they did. I mean, I'm trying to think of a way to put this. Like growing up, just being out there, I guess on the streets, you're dealing with like bullies, I guess you'd call them. Some roughnecks in the neighborhood. And they might try to goat you into doing something so they can justify doing something to you. Right? They're not coming over to you, they're not touching you. Right? They're not doing anything, but they'll talk about you, or let's say your girlfriend. Talk about things they want going to do to her, do to your mother, to your sister and stuff. Threaten you, like they're gonna bust your teeth up, but they're not actually doing anything. They're basically trolling you and goading you into reacting physically because you're starting to get uncomfortable. You're starting to get nervous that this person's actually going to follow through with their words. And in a sense, rightfully so. But they're not actually doing anything. So what you need to do is just keep your cool and realize they're just talking. You don't let them get in your head. Just get on guard. They're saying they're going to do something, so just pay attention to them and be on guard that, hey, if they try to do something, then defend yourself, defend your family, your friends. But as long as they're just talking, you just don't react, right? Because a lot of these people, they feed off of your reaction. They like seeing how they can get in your head and watch you get worked up. And then if you get physical, they'd be like, oh, low. And then they justify defending themselves and attacking you. Because they'll be like, well, I was just talking, just messing around. Right? And that's how it generally works. We got the freedom of speech. And I know when people threaten, you can do something even if they didn't do anything. If they're threatening to do something, you can defend yourself because they just told you they were going to do something, right? But at the same time, you don't really want to attack anybody unless they attack you, right? I mean, especially if you're a Christian. So, yeah, I mean, it's not as if things are really bad right now. Yeah, they're not fun. They're uncomfortable. It's basically just a waiting game, right? We're getting older and we're falling apart. Work sucks. Taxes suck. But all in all, things can be a lot worse. And they're going to be a lot worse. And you don't know how bad it's going to get before Jesus actually comes back. You see how it is in China, in Muslim countries when you're a Christian. Imprisonment, beatings, and death. You don't have to deal with that. You got to deal with some awkwardness, some uncomfortableness, some loud mouth people. That's about it. right? It's not fun, but it's really not that bad when you think about it. You think about the torture and suffering Christians had to go through throughout history, and thinking about what you're getting upset about now and that you want to get out of it now. So, all in all, I'll just say that Jesus is coming when he's coming, and that he's going to take us when he takes us. And yeah, hopefully it's on one of these feast days. Hopefully it's this Pentecost. Maybe it's like some of the people who think it's imminent. It could be at any time. It could be right now. That's fantastic. But when you're constantly putting it out there, especially some of these people who talk about it as it's imminent, like it could be today, I think that's more of a hindrance than anything. I mean, even Christians start to get annoyed by the people saying, hey, it could be today. And they're talking about news events. Look at what's going on with Israel and this, it's going to be today. And it's just like, enough. Like, how do you keep that pace up? But you see this talking about it, the rapture, it gets people's attention. It gets views. And even if you're not making money off of it, you can do two things with that attention. You can feed your attention center, right, that actually wants that attention. And then you can also throw out other ideas and agendas that you may have. Like I was saying, they're attaching the gospel to this, where it's almost going to be to the point soon here when you're not talking about the rapture. You talking to somebody about the gospel, you want to give them a track and talk about how they're a sinner that needs to be born again. And they're just going to think, oh, you're one of those rapture weirdos, because they're going to associate gospel with the people keep talking about the raptures at this day, no, it's at this day, no. Because we already see now with a lot of this propaganda films coming out, like The Chosen and Jesus Revolution and The Sound of Freedom and some other ones like that that are popping up that are heavily Catholic influenced. That Catholics are looking like the good guys. Like you got the Catholic coming out with What is a Woman, right? They're coming out with these things that are actually things that Christians need to be standing up and talking about, right? But instead, Christians are not talking about these things for the most part, and just talking about, hey, the rapture is going to be here tomorrow, or if not, the day after. While the Catholics, who are not giving the gospel to the world, are actually looking like the good guys, standing up for what is right, talking about what is a woman, coming out with this movie Nefarious, where you get a depiction of this demon-possessed man and what the demons are doing behind the scenes and manipulating people and causing all this havoc, and how they relish in abortion and this stuff. Right? They're saying things that Christians are just seem to be scared to say. And people are being led to that more and more, mainly because of the influence that the Protestants have. Even the Protestants that are preaching the gospel are giving out this really shitty example and really just deterring anybody who's looking for Christianity, just basically pointing them to the Catholic Church and just ushering them over to that. And they're not going to get saved there. They're going to be brought into the bondage of the Catholic Church in the sense that they're never going to have any joy, peace, or love from the Holy Spirit, because they're never going to be sure of their salvation. They're just going to hope, like I talk to a lot of these Catholics, they're like, well, hopefully, if I'm lucky, I'll go to purgatory. And it'd be like, oh, well, how long will you be burning in purgatory? I don't know. Like, it's an indefinite amount of time. You just be there. You never know when you're going to get out. And it's basically hell. Right? So they're never going to have that assurity. They might not even get purgatory. They might go to hell, even though they're doing all these rituals and doing all of this their whole life, carrying this burden of doing all these things that they don't really want to do. Like they talk about, it's out of love for God, love for your fellow man, but they're doing it to save their soul from hell and to earn heaven. And a lot of this stuff is actually pointing people there. So, yeah. With all that being said, I think I said everything I wanted to say. I could say it a few more times, a few different ways, I suppose, but I think you get the point. So, thanks for watching. Take care. Alright, I wanted to splice this in here. I forgot to bring this up because, like I was saying, about setting an example. And right now, Catholics are looking like the heroes. Let me explain. Where we can read here, I know you can see that I searched grave in the New Testament. And these 3 verses right here tell us to be grave. Where it says, be sober, grave, temperate. The wives be grave. The deacons be grave. You know what that means? I didn't know what that meant either. Be grave? Like a grave is where you bury the dead bodies, right? So what does it mean to be grave? Well, it means to be serious, to be mature with integrity, right? And think about this as an unbeliever, you're looking for Christianity that has some kind of moral backbone and strength to stand up to the world. Who are you going to go after? Or you see someone like Barry Aw with his tattoos, playing poker, going, Mr. Bones, the Rapture's tomorrow. Constantly, right? You know, I love the guy, and he seems to have a good heart. But is that appealing? Is like, hey, this is a guy, hey, I want to be like this guy. I want to follow this guy. He's really doing something for the people. He's speaking for the people, right? He's standing up for what is right and against what is going on in this world. Or are you going to go to these Catholics that are talking about what is a woman? Talking about these transgenders and what have you. If you've ever seen that documentary, you got the Sound of Freedom talking about the child trafficking. Another Catholic video there. You have The Chosen. Everybody's saying it's just wonderful. The Jesus Revolution. Again, saying it's all wonderful. Kicking out all the old Christians and bringing in the new ones. Right? You got all these other propaganda films coming out there. One that I enjoyed, Nefarious. But it was also Catholic, where it was talking about these demons can tempt you and get you into allowing them to possess you. And this is true, but what he added is like, oh, the child's not baptized, we can start working on them when they're young, right? And that's just the Catholic belief there, is to get you into that Catholic mindset. And then in the movie also, they have a Catholic priest come in, and he doesn't even say anything, and this demon's scared of him, right? Worried about him being cast out by this Son of God character. Again, portraying that the Catholics are the ones that know what's going on, and they're speaking out against the immorality of the world, as this movie depicts how the demon relishes in abortion, like I was talking about, and getting people to sacrifice God's creation. And it gets into more detail. I'm not going to get into that stuff here. But which one appeals to you? Right? You're trying to reach the world. What's going to appeal to the world? That you're standing up against the moral wrong and preaching for the moral right? Or you just joking around, being worldly, talking about the rapture being tomorrow? And then it never is. Yeah, eventually they're going to be right, right? Because you keep saying it's tomorrow. Well, eventually, one of these times, tomorrow will be the rapture, right? So eventually they'll be right. But what is the world going to be drawn to? So that's why I brought this up about how we are to be serious with maturity, with integrity. We're not to be jesting and joking. I get now and then needing to relax a bit. But if you're going to go out with these videos trying to reach people, going out doing your sermons and teachings and what have you, it shouldn't be about putting on a show for everybody, right? They need to look at you as if you're serious, that you're not looking at this as a joke, that you're just trying to entertain them to get them to come listen to you. Because people realize that's what you're doing. Right? They might listen to you, but they're just doing it because you're entertaining them. They don't take you seriously. Right? So just think of Jesus. There's not a whole lot of joking going on in the Gospels. Jesus is a very serious man. Very loving man, too. So think about that. Right? Because that's what I'm more concerned about, is not, oh, yay, we can just chill and relax and be goofy because we're going to be raptured tomorrow. No, that means you got to straighten up and do your best to reflect God to the world so that, hey, maybe you'll reach one person. And if we all reach one person, fantastic. At least we'd reach one person, right? Better than entertaining a million. Right? So thanks again for watching. Take care.
That fella couldn't join the church. He couldn't join the church. He couldn't get baptized. He couldn't get baptized. He woke up with God. He woke up with the devil. Are you saved? Amen. So that fella didn't take the sacraments. Didn't take the sacraments. Didn't say the rosary. Didn't say the rosary. Didn't tithe. Didn't tithe. He went to heaven. He went to hell. You saved? Didn't keep the law. He didn't keep the law. He broke the commandments. He broke the commandments. He didn't keep the golden rule. He didn't keep the golden rule. He woke up in glory. He woke up in the pit. Are you saved? You're saved. If you're not saved, you're over here or you're over here. You sure ain't in the middle. He said, Lord, remember me, thou comest thy kingdom. And Jesus turned to him and said, Verily I say unto thee, today shalt thou be saved. Just like that. You have been saved? If you ever saved, you were saved like that.